comes to mind when you think of Canada? I think about music. I think about Broken Social Scene. I was 13 years old when I first heard Broken Social Scene. And for better or worse, it changed my life.
Are you filming?
Yeah.
My opinion of Canadian music.
With all of my favorite bands from Canada, there's something like underlying that is in common with them all. Like, I don't know, there's the water in Canada. I'm not sure. But there definitely is something that's intangible that all these bands have.
Broken Social Scene. There's such a unique collaboration of artists that are all doing their own thing, and I'm a huge Feist fan.
So you're making a movie about Broken Social Scene?
I'm making a movie about the connectedness of Canadian bands, and because I like all
Starting
Canadian
at
bands.
Broken Social Scene?
What?
Yeah, I love Broken Social Scene.
Yeah, I love the Weakerthans. They're my favorite band, which is like a big deal because I've been listening to them for like 7 years and I never call a band my favorite band. So
I like Sam Roberts. I think I've seen them 3 times. Ours is like my favorite ever. Like, Bitches in Tokyo is my favorite song.
Broken Social Scene. Rock Sores, My Sock Sores. They're okay. There's so many of them. I can't trust that they're all Canadian.
How about Spencer Krug being the busiest man in the universe?
Godspeed, you Black Emperor.
I feel they always gravitated to do something a little differently, at least, even in the world of post-rock, and I feel they started like almost like patenting tones and guitar tones that a lot of people weren't doing at the time, and now a lot of bands are picking up on.
Part of the country is very Eurocentric, and part of it, much of it is very influenced by America, so you get this strange mix of like, sort of like the rootsy American stuff mixed with the arty European stuff.
I feel they're just really ahead of their time with their political sentiments and just their music themselves. It's very highly orchestrated. I also see people who tend to maybe not usually into that kind of thing gravitate towards it because it's very powerful. You can just feel that it's just the music has a lot of direction and passion and meaning behind it.
You get legitimate artists that come from Canada. Really, really talented individuals.
I mean, take someone like Final Fantasy or Owen Pallett. You know, it's so pretty that it's almost, you know, you don't want to like be running around town bumping it out of your speakers, but it's at the same time so musically amazing.
I mean, you've always had these scenes in America, Canada, Europe, where the scenes have become suddenly hip and big, but in Canada they seem to, I mean, in the Canadian scene it seems like it's spread around more, where the bands all make an effort to play in each other's bands and to write for each other and sing for each other, and that is interesting and I think kind of unusual. It is, a lot of the bands are done as collectives, and I don't know if we've seen collective scenes get to the level that this one has.
They break the rules in a pop format kind of way.
I was in a car with a friend of mine, and she put on their album, and I wanted really desperately to impress her because I think I had a crush on her. And I remember feeling really impressive that I had heard of the band and that we had something in common. And a few weeks after that, I got my first serious girlfriend. So I think I took it as a sign that the fact that both Broken Social Scene and The First Real Relationship showed up at exactly the same time. So they were kind of a huge deal to me. I started looking into more of the bands associated with them. I saw that every time I bought a new album by a Canadian musician, I started seeing the same names over and over again on the liner notes. And I got this picture of all of my favorite musicians just getting together to play records and shows and help produce each other's albums. And I needed that so badly because I didn't really feel close to anyone. And then thanks to the music, I was able to get closer to my friends. We started a band because I wanted to be just like these guys and invited all of my friends to play in them. And I've always been kind of obsessive. So it made sense for this giant web to arrive that I would scrutinize it. I would love getting my hands on something from Arts and Crafts Records or Constellation Records or Jaguar. And it just struck me that bands from British Columbia were collaborating with bands from Toronto and Montreal and the edge of New Brunswick. So it struck me that they were working like a family, that it just got bigger by the day and it was just going to keep growing. I know that if I didn't have those connections, if I didn't have the music of Broken Social Scene and know how many people came together to make it, there's a good chance I wouldn't have done half the things that I did. By 2009, my friends and I were distant. My girlfriend and I were distant. My parents were getting separated. I hated college. I hadn't made many friends. I lived alone for most of a year until I found out my apartment was a scam, and then slept on the couches of the few people I had met who were nice enough to let me stay with them. And I kept getting asked what I was going to do after college. And then I realized that I really didn't have a whole lot of time to answer that question. I decided to go to Canada and see if it was actually love for each other that kept them making music. Because everything that I had always taken for granted was changing, and I needed to see how you keep a family that big together.
I mean, we have some truly great friends who just happen to be very talented musicians who are making music that the rest of the world is finally listening to, paying attention to. And it's inspiring to us, and it pushes us. We quickly learned as of, say, 2002, 2003, when Broken Social Scene really cracked through, and all the other bands really started to make their mark as well, that there was no just sort of sitting around and resting on whatever laurels you managed to attain for yourself. It became very clear that to survive in the Canadian musical climate, you had to be creative, you had to be ambitious.
There's a lot more things that I can fuck up, so I'm definitely going to be doing that. Yeah, I'm really excited about it, actually. I really feel like playing really simple music, and I knew of a really dive place in Toronto, and I knew of Julian and Dean, and I figured they'd want to do it too, so that's kind of what we did. We just had a regular gig Tuesday nights at a place that no longer exists in Toronto.
Remember the first time you heard Folkloric Field? Oh man, lost my mind. I tour manage Hustle Hustle. Currently do backline and guitar technique for Broken Social Scene, and whatever Arts and Crafts wants me to do.
Well, there is a scene, and that everybody is sort of, they're in it together, they're a family. Has that been your experience?
My experience, definitely, 100%. Well, specifically because the bands that I work with all sort of started as, well, Apostle was around before Broken, which I don't think gets enough recognition. I don't think people realize that.
Toronto has got fucking 42 scenes of music that they don't even come into like the arts and crafts sphere. There's just so much going on, and now I live in Montreal, and it's the same thing. There's a whole new bag of things going on, and not everyone knows each other, and not everyone is like pals with each other. There's some crossover for sure, but I think it's just like anywhere else.
I guess it's the nature of some of the bands, more of a sort of super group or large group of people type band. I think it's about the music more than the community, because in my experience of getting to travel a little bit, that community's everywhere.
You know, someone like Metric, who's not affiliated with Arts and Crafts. Well, they're on Arts and Crafts Mexico now, but they're still all so tight. I mean, like, those people have been going, like Stars, Metric, Berlin Social Scene, like, they've all been going to school with each other since, like, high school.
Yeah.
So whenever we go somewhere and there's a band that's, you know, sort of related that way, you can feel, they feel the family vibe. So it's just more comfortable.
I guess Feel Good Lost was about to be released. Kevin and Brendan wanted to put on a show of some kind, and, you know, Leslie sings on Passport Radio. I talk to Leslie, she talks to me, and then we just kind of made a little band, the five of us, me, Canning, Kevin, Leslie, and Paroff. Kevin called Charles, and he came for the next one, and so did Johnny Crossingham. And then that was the next one. And then we basically played a year of shows in Toronto, only in Toronto, and different lineups every time, and like basically an entirely new set every time.
I have urges to like branch out and, you know, sort of like, I have my dual citizenship, so part of me is like, well, I could just disappear to the States and, you know, hand in my resume and hope for the best, but there's like definite like, it's my job and I can feel that, but there's a sort of like, there's a hug at the end of the day, you know? Marty, for example, who is Brooklyn Social Scene sound guy and tours with, you know, Sam Roberts, Sarah Harmer, he, you know, he said something to me in my second or third time meeting him, which is like, I only work with my friends and my family. Why would you do anything else? And so, I think, yeah, it's definitely a big family vibe.
Hey Sarah, I don't know what you're doing this Saturday. I think you had a thing, but I just wanted to know if maybe you wanted to come to Philadelphia and meet Spencer Krug as an early birthday gift. Alright, cool. Just give me a call back.
And you're bringing other people on tour and you're making albums and stuff like that, that you're just pulling from, you know, your friends and the people that you consider family. Does it seem like everybody's in it for the same reasons and everybody's in it to help one another?
No, I don't think it's as like rosy as all that. But there's a lot of like really good people in Montreal and the neighborhood that we all live in. Is a really supportive community, right? But I wouldn't go so far as to say like feels like family. Like my bands feel like family, but I don't feel like other Montreal bands are part of my family. I feel like they're part of my community, and for the most part, the bands are pretty supportive with one another, but not all of them.
You know, there's no connect between East and West. Very little. You know, those guys are a whole different bag.
Amy, who's also in my band, actually knew Spencer Krug from out west in Victoria. They actually were roommates at one point. And there's a lot of undercurrents in Montreal that often don't spread beyond the city, and I think there's a lot of value in that stuff too.
That's one good thing I think about Montreal is it's a pretty inclusive community, and like, yeah, like it doesn't seem to matter if people are in like kind of more famous bands. There's not an element of snobbery there or anything like that, which is really nice. So, yeah.
After playing in Toronto for so many years, you develop a lot of friends. Like imagine if you went to the same high school for 16 or 17 years. Eventually, you just get to know a certain group of people after a number of years, then another group of people. So I think with our thing, it's kind of a culmination of that many relationships, you know? The beginning was just me and Kevin in the basement, kind of fucking around on any track. Lots of late night recording experiments and trying to do something a little bit, just a little bit different. You know, there seems to be a good crop of bands happening, that's all. There's no shortage of talent up in good old Canada.
Scene, Metric, Stars, Feist, Jason Collette, Apostle of Hustle, and I've known all those guys since I was young. Played T-ball with Evan Cranley, I've known Jimmy from Metric since I was 12, and Emily since I was around 15. My mom delivered Jason Collette's kids, and yeah, I've got long-standing relationships with all those guys from going to school and from growing up in Toronto. And all of those bands existed for a really long time, like Amy and Evan and Torkel and Chris from Stars have been, you know, trying to get Stars off the ground in Brooklyn since, you know, around the same age, since their early 20s. You know, Jason Collette had been playing with Grievous Angels. Everybody was established musicians, and the wonderful thing about Broken Social Scene is when Brendan and Kevin wrote the record, and then they started performing as Broken Social Scene, they took all of these people and all of their friends and brought them into the collective, and then with the recognition they got from Broken Social Scene, they kind of then sort of shone the sort of searchlight back on those bands. You know, take a look at these guys. These are amazing bands. These are good friends. And they always, you know, they always said that. They were always like, you know, these guys are from these bands and they're playing with us, and you know, these are fantastic bands, and it kind of mushroomed into everybody sort of rising up together, which is really cool.
Give it for a dear friend from Montreal in a band called Stars, Mercedes Miller.
We've been friends with the Deers and
the Stills.
And Sam Roberts, great guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
it's definitely a community of musicians there.
We go to coffee shops. There's some beers we are having.
Stars was a recording project between Chris Sullivan and Torkel Campbell that started in about 1998, and the band started in Brooklyn. And we were all childhood friends from Toronto, and I met the guys again after being kids with them as they were working on an album called Night Songs. And me and Amy joined them in Brooklyn, and then we shortly after a couple of sessions, right before Night Songs came out, we moved to Montreal and made Montreal our home base.
I have a solo career, which is a great band. It's not solo at all. It's kind of a lie. It's just my own name. I sang a song with Sam Roberts once. It's in French. It didn't make the record. That happens to me a lot. I don't know why. I play with a great gal out of sort of Ottawa Valley. She's been my friend for a really long time. Her name's Jenny Whiteley. We played a session. They did a live recording of the Deers in Montreal, and I played some flute, and he played some horn.
It's funny. It's a question I get asked all the time, and I'm still trying to figure that out. I mean, we're a very young country, you know, and I think that's kind of. So I think the sound is still evolving. To say there's a Montreal sound, I think that's a really premature thing to say. But it's definitely a community, and it's not just a musical connection everyone has, but it's genuine friendships.
Because I knew that they sometimes look for horn players when they're in town, and he emailed me back and said he needed a trumpet, so I came in and learned the licks with them and played with them and went out and had a great time.
Especially with you being a horn player, because he plays trombone, he gets sort of invited to play on lots of records, and also being a bass player, like you go in for sessions and stuff with people, and I think you going and playing, and regardless, sometimes people pay you and sometimes they can't afford it, and no matter what, you'll always show up and be supportive.
Hey sweetheart, I was just calling to check in, see how things are going out there. I'm about to interview Mastercraft. Yeah, I miss you very much. Just give me a call back when you get this. Alright, cool, bye-bye.
Then there's that like secondary or tertiary like music consumer that you'll run into on the street, and they'll be like, "Oh shit, are you that guy from Mastercraft? What are you doing in town?" And then you'll be like, "I live here." And they're like, "Really? You live in Toronto?"
I was at a diner. I was at a diner down the street from my house the day before we left last tour, and this guy's like, "Hey, what do you guys do? What are you doing here? You guys playing?" I'm like, "I live literally on the next corner." I go, "Oh,
I thought you guys were from LA."
And he was wearing a Toronto hat. It's like, dude.
For us, I mean, there's this kind of system that is in place for some reason for Canadian artists to be successful, which is that you have to gain a certain amount of success abroad before anybody will take you seriously.
That's another thing about Canada. Like, we define, unfortunately, I don't. Al doesn't, but for a lot of Canadians in the popular culture in Canada is to define yourself by how un-American you are. Because Canada isn't a country with an identity like America. We're not a melting pot, we're a mosaic. Is that people from Toronto don't like people from Montreal, and people from Montreal don't like people from Toronto. Nobody likes people from Vancouver, and nobody likes people from Halifax. It's like nobody, we all hate each other. It's really, Forget East Coast, West Coast. It's just like intercity. Everyone, any city you go to in Canada, they will say they hate Toronto. Every city in Canada other than Toronto will say they hate Toronto. Everyone. And people in Montreal think they're the greatest city in the world. They think they make the best music in the world. I'm like, all your bands sound the same. I'm guilty of it too. Their bands all sound the same. It's true. Here's a great joke that's said by like-minded Canadians to myself. So there's in the international water, there's like Canada and American water. There's a Canadian lobster fisherman and an American lobster fisherman. They're both pulling lobsters out, tossing them in buckets, and the Canadian guy doesn't have a lid on his bucket, and the American guy, as he's putting the lobsters, he's putting a lid on. And he looks over and he sees the Canadian guy in his boat. He doesn't have a lid on the bucket of lobsters. And he yells and he's like, "Hey man, you gotta put a lid on the bucket of lobsters. They're gonna crawl out." And the Canadian guy says, "Oh, don't worry, they're Canadian lobsters. As soon as one gets up higher than the rest of them will pull them back down."
In my mind, in my experience, there's a great spirit of camaraderie that seems to pervade almost all band relationships in a way up there. I don't know why that is. I certainly notice a difference when you come down to the States. There's a little bit more competitiveness between bands. It takes a little longer to establish what you'd call a friendship or a real sort of relationship, mutual respect that doesn't have the sort of the suspiciousness that's inherently built into bands vying for a limited amount of whether it be media, real estate, or space on the radio, or just whatever it is. So in Canada, it seems that we're able to put, seems maybe being the operative word, but we're able to put that competitiveness aside. Play for a completely different audience than, say, a Broken Social Scene, or I don't know, Stars or Metric or anything. So because of that, we feel like we have our place, and we can feel comfortable in our place, in our own skin, and then still appreciate the other bands because they're doing their own thing. Relationships are so really important to us, and it's been they provide a great deal of comfort when you're going through that transition, that transformation from a band who's completely unknown, even like we were until age 27, 28, to all of a sudden being thrust into the limelight. To have other people who are undergoing that similar transformation, dealing with the same newfound pressure. To take this seed of possibility of success and actually grow it into something substantial and lasting. It was great to have our friends undergoing their similar sort of journey on that on that front.
Like, I do think that in Montreal that there are there's a community and there's people that are going to see each other's bands and stuff, but it's not like a collective mentality for every band. Like, obviously, because I think in every city the same thing exists.
We have fewer musicians, so if you're looking at like one genre of music or a couple of genres that are closely related, then chances are a lot of those musicians, like across the whole country, not just within a city, kind of know each other because they've met each other just from like working on the same sort of thing, and so in that way you become sort of friends, or you're going to become competitors, but to become competitors is it's just not a very healthy or fun way to live.
Hey, sweetheart. I was just calling to check in. I'm in Montreal. A lot of my interviews have canceled on me, so I'm feeling kind of lost. But I got an interview with Jessica Moss and some of the guys from Godspeed You Black Emperor. Jessica's 9 months pregnant, so we'll see how that goes. Yeah, I just hadn't heard from you in a while and wanted to hear your voice, so give me a call back. Alright, bye-bye.
You know, to be honest, a lot of that was just kind of like lazy writing, you know, because, I mean, there never has been like a constellation sound, you know. You know, for instance, Do Make Say Think, you know, those aren't friends of ours, you know what I mean? Like, we're not buddies or anything, you know, they're a Toronto band, we're Montreal bands, regionalism is an important thing, you know, like, you know, we don't, so there isn't, you know, in the early years there was this sort of like assumption that we were all like hanging out together and jamming or something, you know, when that really wasn't the case. We felt kinship with Fly Pan Am. Personally I felt kinship with Fly Pan Am. Godspeed did as well. We were buddies with Exhaust, but you know, other than that, you know, there wasn't as much commonality musically or socially as you would think from reading about it from the outside.
I would say for myself that my actual community of musicians involves maybe 10 people that I play in bands with, or that I've played music with. Like, just there's a small community for sure. And then Montreal itself, if you're English speaking, and somewhat if you play music, the more if you're English speaking and with a certain kind of, if you have a certain kind of interest in a certain kind of way of living, there's a better chance that you know each other in this city than maybe others, because sort of, there's a very, if you're English speaking, it's a pretty limited square that you live within.
Miami, everyone sort of hung out and talked a lot about playing in bands and all the things that people were going to do, but people never really did anything. There was a lot of talking. And then all of a sudden things started happening. I don't know. Yeah. We kind of lucked out into things. The short answer is we kind of lucked out into things. I mean, we also worked hard. We were out there, you know, touring and all that, and also other people were working hard for us too, like the labels. Were like Together labels and like Constellation Cranky, and it felt right for us to say build that relationship with Constellation, and that you know, I mean, because Godspeed was a successful thing and money was being made from it, so it felt right for us that money was coming back into Montreal and going places that we could see it instead of going off to like CBS Records shareholders or whatever, and or getting cycled into making bombs or something. It was like going back into the world that we came from. A lot of us ended up in this world, like, yeah, because our own families were kind of dysfunctional. You listen, and we were on the search for like social relations with other people that weren't based on blood and names, last names and such. But at the same time, we're also aware that we weren't like atoms and like individualized people, and we wanted to be part of a scene. So, and like that was our our support structure. And that's how we did and how we still do survive. I prefer playing in bands. I prefer trying to do anything I do collectively or try and make it. You know, like it's kind of how I operate. I don't know.
This is an ISO room. It's called the ambient ISO room because it's really a lot of natural reverb to it. So if we want to record something that we would put reverb on, it's easier to do it here in this room as opposed to using something artificial. This is the red velvet curtain, which gets closed if we're looking for a more dry sound. Concrete area where there's more reflections. So sort of drums sometimes sound livelier on that end. This is another ISO room over here, which is a more dead sounding ISO room. And then this is the control room, where the control happens. I mean, there is a sense of community, for sure, in a lot of the bands that have recorded here. But there's also an equal amount of bands who have nothing to do with that community. I do think that having a sort of small pool of musicians who each play on each other's projects and a record label that is sort of dedicated to helping foster that community does foster that community. You know, in the late 90s when Godspeed was getting more popular and playing to people outside of Montreal, I know it validated a great many things for people who are making music in the city. One of the huge things that it validated was that you can do things by your own rules, and you could be in a band and make your own records and book your own tours and do all the business stuff of a band by yourself, and that in itself was a perfect life of a musician. If you could be making the music you want to make and play it for people and record it and have people buy it, that's really all you need. It's a pleasure to work with Vic Chestnut. It's really amazing and challenging to record a Silver Mount Zion. I've asked myself, you know, why did we get so lucky that all these incredibly talented people have come through our studio? You know, there's lots of recording studios in this city and other cities, you know. And I think part of it is that maybe the fact that the studio is run by musicians who are hopefully sympathetic to what people in bands do is part of the reason. I think another reason is that I think all of us view recording more as a collaboration. I mean, I think that friendship is definitely an element. I mean, you know, it's kind of like sort of chicken and egg in a sense, because all of us sort of became friends by creating this together and by making music together and recording music together. It wasn't really a case of, oh, here's a bunch of friends, let's do this. It was really more along the lines of, here's a bunch of like-minded people and let's create something that makes this community self-sufficient. And then through that we've become friends, and then the friendship sort of regenerates itself into what we're doing. I mean, the Hotel Tatanka was really one of the first artist-run recording studios in Montreal. There were a few before, but certainly not as many as there are now. And I kind of feel like before the hotel happened, there was really this disconnect. You know, there was sort of corporate feeling studios. I think it is important to point out that the artistic community became a little more self-sufficient when a bunch of artists decided to buy equipment a piece at a time and call it a recording studio way before it was, you know, should have been called a recording studio. This is how you close the curtain.
Hey, I was just calling to check in. Haven't heard from you in a pretty long time. Just wanted to make sure you were getting my messages and stuff. Yeah, Montreal went pretty okay. I'm driving out tomorrow to Sackville, New Brunswick for Sabby Fest, which is going to be cool. Which means I'm going to be on the road for like 12 hours. But if you call, I can pull over and we can talk. Alright, cool. I miss you very much. Bye-bye.
about 2006 when we sort of got Sappy Records up and running again, and we thought it would be a nice way, we being John Plater and I and Julie Guerin, to sort of celebrate the relaunching of the label and have a small little festival. The idea was to keep it really small and basically just have a bunch of our friends play for a bunch of our friends, not charge anything. And then essentially Eric's trip was into the idea of playing, and that sort of just brought it open, like kind of cracked it wide open, and a lot of people wanted to come.
The ramifications are very large tonight. The stars say don't pick a fight or boss things around.
We kind of describe it as a wedding reception without the vows. It's sort of what we're going for, is just get a bunch of our friends together, and then just more and more people are becoming our friends, and it grows, and that sort of the reputation that's sort of emitted from the artists as they tour across the country is drawing more and more people to Sackville for the event every year. So what you're witnessing this year is just sort of the exponential growth of that. It's hard to walk, like I'm constantly running through the crowd, and you know, anybody who has a second is trying to touch me and just go, hey, this is really great, thank you. You know, and that's just like, wow, okay, yeah, thank you. You know, you're welcome, thank you for coming. It's like, it's a real honor, I guess, to be a part of something and work with an amazing group of people to put this on. It's just everywhere you look through the crowd, it's like somebody I know that's having a great time and willing to help out as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, here is Come Down This Monday.
That was my youngest child. She just turned 7. That was Rosie. I've managed to be a part of a very supportive community of musicians. And I think that probably everyone, probably depending on their style of music, has managed to find that as well. So I think that within Canada, probably as in anywhere, I think we do have a very supportive bunch of musicians. But it's probably kind of genre specific in a way, maybe. Maybe we should just ride. Maybe we should just ride. Maybe we should just ride. Maybe we should just ride home. I've never really, I don't think I've ever gone, like, hired strangers. It's always been friends that I've been really fond of and friends that I really admire musically. So for that reason, I've been really lucky. Like the Wooden Stars are amazing. Like Herman Dune from Paris, like I worked with them a lot in Europe, and that was amazing. There have been many. Shotgun and Jaybird was really fun when they were backing me up. So, and then now the Baird brothers, like sometimes you have to get to know them a little bit. Like when I first started working with the Wooden Stars, I only knew like 1 or 2 of the band members really well, but then after a tour you get to know each other and then you're fine. So, but I really respected them musically, so that was what I was really interested in. So, and I was knowing them a little bit because I was putting out their record, so it was, yeah. So I can't imagine just hiring a bunch of studio musicians. Yeah, because you can be really good and like technically really learned, but I have to really sort of be able to feel something about what they're doing on their own as well. And that's generally why I would want to work with anybody.
Don't worry, I like to you, baby, it's your body.
There's just so much stagnant culture out there that when something is interesting and full of community and friendship and ultimately love, that people are drawn to that, and I think that's why bands like Lady Hawk are willing to sort of fly out here on their own dime, and we do our best to take care of them and get them paid as much as we can afford. It's certainly probably not what they're worth in the market.
Because it's the best festival in Canada, so.
Duffy kind of needed a band. We all hung out together all the time. Just happened. Pretty natural.
It's easier to like spread the word in Canada than it is in any other country.
Canada's basically a really small town when you think about the music community. It seems like everybody knows everyone, and it's fairly supportive. Like within, I guess, the particular scene that we're in, I guess, rock and roll or whatever.
Because there's so many bands in the States or something, it just seems like the bands that become popular very popular for a very short period of time, and then they're sort of forgotten, and then it moves on to someone else. Whereas I think in Canada you have like more long-term kind of support.
It's the same in the UK, you know, like extremely popular for a really short period of time. Yeah, there's a lot more of I feel like a nurturing process that can go on in Canada. There's not a lot of pressure really to make music that doesn't come like I guess from our hearts or whatever. There's not that feeling like we should be making music that people like, which might be a good idea, but
it's probably smarter to make music that people like.
At first it was just like new friends, and then it was definitely family, and now it's family and it's job to a certain extent. I mean, a job that we dedicate a lot of time to, and hopefully we'll be in a place one day when we can play music full time and support ourselves with that. In Toronto, I guess it's a good place to meet musicians. It's a good place to be in a band because people are very supportive. It's actually a really good place to play music. There's a lot of good venues where you can just call them up and book a show. And if you want to set up your own show, it's pretty easy. And if you play enough shows, then there's a lot of good independent promoters who will set one up for you. So I'd say it has a good infrastructure for a lot of new bands, and they can get out there and play music pretty quickly, as well as just fostering, new talent is use the word fostering. Yeah, as far as bringing up bands, it's a pretty supportive atmosphere.
Pretty nice to come here. I've come here with Ryan twice, and we have a really good time. This time a lot more friends came, and so it's kind of a nice opportunity to be amongst friends without having to work, or without having to, all being together without the little things that keep you apart at home, day to day.
And she comes, when she comes, when she comes to me. What does that say about the way she moves?
You could say there's more at stake in terms of careers and stuff in the United States because it's actually possible. It's very hard to be a professional musician in Canada, and I think that when you add the idea of a career into anything, maybe some interesting stories get lost.
Is this coming in and out? Yeah.
All of the bars were owned and controlled by business people that couldn't have cared less about music per se. So it was just a constant fight to find decent places to play. Lofts would spring up every now and again, but they seldom lasted long because of the city would clamp down on them. There were no decent recording studios that were affordable for independent musicians. There were really no record labels doing anything or releasing anything, at least the kinds of music that Ian, my partner, Constellation, the kinds of music we're interested in. So, we had actually set out to, in the beginning, to create some kind of artist-friendly performance space. And have a record label grow out of that. We spent, we wasted probably a year to a year and a half trying to pursue that, and just got hamstrung every step of the way by the red tape. So at some point we just kind of said, well, why don't we release these records? And we did, and our focus shifted pretty quickly away from the performance space because as those records were being made, the Hotel de Tango, where Godspeed You Black Emperor was rehearsing, they had started to put on shows there, and then Ian and I moved into a loft in the old quarter of the city, and also started to put on shows there. So between those two spaces, the dire need for places for bands to play was starting to be taken care of, and then our world unfolded from there. Ian and I have jobs that we love, but the reason we love them is because we still largely get to run a record label the way we believe it should be run.
Around them? No, mostly people are pretty selfish and individualistic about
about stuff, about music. No, I mean, yeah, no, there's definitely been a lot of support, regardless of fame, it seems, but it's interesting to see it change over time, but a lot of the bands I've formed have been mostly like outside of Montreal from, the West Coast and growing up in high school in BC, so that was a lot smaller of a community, and like the idea of playing music had a lot less attached to it, like there's like a lot more purity to playing music.
I have seen the most incredible light in your eyes, in your eyes, in your eyes. So cast away.
Not necessarily talent. I don't think that it's contingent on friendship as much as the ability to communicate certain ideas. So, I mean, because like people in Clues, for example, and in Unicorns as well, there was varying levels of ability in terms of musicality, but that's not a definitive thing. It seems, at least for the bands that I've been a part of, has not been so much about certainly it's about relationships. Unicorns is an exception, and maybe Clues is as well, where there's like elements of friendship, and then there's divergence also, like as things develop and move along. I mean, with Unicorns, it did come out of a friendship and was nourished by that. For me, it's more about like ideas.
I'd say it was out of friendship. And, I think that's the primary thing that pulled me. Just held those groups of people together for certain periods of time. I'm not that clear-headed about it personally at this point to see it just as friendship. And it would really depend on the music, though. Arcade Fire had a very strong support of a certain, at least a certain group of people in Montreal. People that were there before we had formed, I think, were maybe suspicious of what we were trying to do, just being a pop band generally. And I think with Clues as well, just really have to win people over. And if you've been, I think, in a city for a while, other musicians are a little suspicious of you, and people just become slightly resentful of each other too, I think. The idea of, we just did this first record, and with Les Anglemore, we just did one record. For me, with the Arcade Fire, we just did one record. Unicorns just did one record. The idea of just doing the first record is kind of sad to me, so because you don't get to do anything to kind of compare to it, or I look forward to a second record, at least to start.
Like Jordan and Michael both are really amazing songwriters and sing their own tunes, but there's no room for that in Sunset Rubdown, and they're willing to contribute to my thing with me, and play integral roles in that, but the role is not to write the songs and sing them, so they have these other projects where they can exercise that impulse. It's pretty natural, I think. And I think that's what happens with bands and like overlapping and incestuous sort of member swapping. It's not like people are just like hungry for fame and just trying to like hop on any wagon they can get on. It's just that they want to express themselves fully.
Hey, I was just calling just to see how you're doing.
I don't know if you're getting my messages or not, but I'm just gonna keep trying, I guess. It's weird being out here and not having anybody to talk to for more than, a few hours every day. It would have been nice if, like, I don't know, it could have worked out that Sarah could have come, but, whatever. Anyway, I'm on my way to Toronto, staying with Joanne from Broken Social Scene, so that should be a lot of fun. Of course, I got a 12-hour drive ahead of me first, but that's alright. I haven't heard from anybody since I left. I don't know. I just wish you'd call so I could have someone to talk to. I'm sorry I couldn't come out and visit. I don't know if you're mad or anything, but yeah, I guess. Give me a call back. Bye-bye.
Community is one of those things that you can't define it, but you know it when you see it. I think that's the best I can do. I've always sort of felt like so at home in Toronto, and sort of almost by necessity, like you know how some people are just like feel it. I don't know, when I was coming up in the 90s, everyone felt like it was necessary to get away from here. Like everyone just sort of romanticized other places, like whether it be Montreal or New York or Berlin. And I don't know, just because I never had like the funds or the sort of connections to like go anywhere. I was kind of stuck here. But then I sort of like really grew to love it. And whenever I traveled, I always felt like everywhere else was kind of lame compared to Toronto. Gradually fell in love with the local music scene, even though it was really kind of like in the early 90s. It was really, at first it was really small and really kind of fragmented and really not known about. The people that I'm the most interested in supporting are the ones who can balance the sort of like the community service with your kind of like obligations to yourself as an artist. To a certain extent, everyone's in it for themselves, you sort of have to look after your own band and your own creative path, and there's of course nothing wrong with that, but it's like a question of like, if you focus on that entirely, like, are you excluding yourself from the community? At the same time, if you're all about the community and you're the person who's going to every show and supporting everyone else's band, but you're also a musician, aren't you kind of like selling yourself short because you're not putting any time into your own thing? The community in that sense has gone through a lot of ups and downs and sort of push-pull between the sort of like the sort of selfishness that's required to be an artist and the kind of selflessness of helping and supporting. And but I mean, what's great about being part of this community is, and having been in the city for so long and having known so many people, is it's so easy to ask for help and get people to help out with recording or making posters. Like there's so many people who are just willing to volunteer their time.
I started in Guelph, and this label 3 Gut Records started as this collective, and it was Royal City, Jim Guthrie, and myself, and it was really supportive. Royal City was basically my backing band for a long time, and that sort of started this whole scene for all of us. A little while after it began, we all moved to Toronto, and then we had our little scene, and then it sort of like grew out, and they signed the Constantines, and then they signed Cuff the Duke, and then it just sort of grew, and that label isn't around anymore, but we've sort of all moved on to things. So now I have Arts and Crafts, which is like a big family, and that's how they kind of treat it. And it wasn't until 3 Gut Records folded that I needed a label. I didn't need a label before that. So once my label folded, yeah. we really began to talk. Like, oh, let's be more than friends. When people play with me, I'm really not sort of a dictator musically. I really want people that have a style or a sound or something, and them to bring that to my songs. In that sense, yeah, I mean, the fact that I've been around Toronto and Montreal and has had a huge impact on the sound of the record. I'm just really lucky and fortunate that I have these amazing friends. For whatever reason, I just have really talented friends who seem to be doing really well in their music careers. So, and I guess, I don't know, it feels like it's always been that way. I guess I'm just drawn to them, and or we're drawn to each other, and circumstances have brought us together. So I think about moving, because I am Dutch, so I have a passport for Europe, and I think about going there, but it scares me sometimes to think of, you know, not being around these people or have access to studios and musicians that I know already. I still know a lot of the hidden cameras. I mean, there are so many members at this point, and so many ex-members and current and fluid members, so I never know exactly who's a hidden camera at what moment. And that was a huge moment for me, that band, because them being a huge queer collective in Toronto, it was early, it was maybe the first or second year that I'd lived in Toronto, so it suddenly opened up my life and my world to this other scene and these people that I didn't know. So it was a pretty great time, actually.
Tons going on, and the art scene and the music scene was really integrated. Like, it was really queer and really straight, and really, like, you go to art shows and there'd be like video and music and installation and fine art, and so, and kind of just everybody saying, yeah, well, that's just the way it is. Everyone kind of knows everybody. Like, I was coming over here, I live here now in Joanne Goldsmith's house, where in the basement where Broken used to rehearse. And, you know, so like everyone's just like chatting with everybody, oh, you're playing the camera show, oh yeah, that's really cool, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, like, Kevin always had like a real, you know, eye for the cameras, and there was all this, you know, excitement. And when they got signed with Rough Trade, it was like, I don't know, it was like everyone was really supportive. But then I think a lot of people really thought, like, you know, the Hidden Cameras were like this family. In a lot of ways we were like this really big family, but I think the difference is that Joel's music is Joel's music, you know. What Arcade Fire was putting on was just like this whole family emotional unit that was just like this huge push. And what we were doing was like kind of like circus family push, but like there just wasn't that. I don't know if it was like a lack of pathos, or there was something just missing that we weren't able to hit. And people are like, oh, it's because you guys are a gay band. It's like, well, maybe there's like 3 gay people in the band, and of course it's like gay content, and that's something that I think the cameras can never really, you know, kind of shake. It's like, oh, you have gay content, you talked about pissing and whatever. So that, you know, that was always talked about. But yeah, man, we were just being like stuck in the middle of some fucking icy motel, like Jasper, just like sitting watching Conan O'Brien show and watching Arcade Fire in there, and we're like, oh, they they look good. Fucking hungry. I'm so hungry, you know. Like, for all these bands that did so well coming out of Toronto and out of Canada, it's like, it was about the love. And like, when you saw that press, you know, everyone's like, oh man, it's about the family, it's about the love, here we go. And, you know, that's the essence of it. But of course, all those things like fall apart instantly when there's like that much passion and that many people, you know, these like big bands happening. It just falls apart. But, you know, luckily if the right people are part of it, then some of it will remain intact, or, you know, and then there's always just the fans who will forever, ever, ever, you know, hold on to like those beautiful moments and constantly tell you about them, and that's probably like the most exciting part of it.
And then my own stuff, or whatever else it is I do, I'm just trying to find an honest way to communicate things that I'm excited about, you know, aspects of who I am. And it's just, yeah, I'm just trying to find a really sincere method of communication. It started in a very organic way. Myself and shortly after Graham were two of the, you know, core members playing a sort of pile of weird, you know, kids' toys and noisy stuff, and inviting other people to join in. So I guess I was always sort of rounding everything up in the beginning, and it's a real band now with a real concise lineup.
Well, for me it began almost at the beginning. But yeah, basically met Brian through mutual friends, and him and I started, actually I guess first I started playing in his band, The Remains, and did a couple of shows with that, and then within that, I think one of the first Holy Fuck gigs that was booked was at Pop Montreal, and that was my first show with Brian, and I was going out there anyway, so we assembled a posse of guys.
I got an email from Graham, and he said, hey, I'm playing this new band called Holy Fuck, and we use lots of different drummers, would you be interested in checking out? And I said, yeah, of course. I love the name. He sent me the record, I liked the record, and immediately I knew it was, yeah, I wanted to play with them.
I moved here new and didn't really know a lot of people, so I was kind of trying to do something, and inevitably it was my own thing. And then before that in Nova Scotia, I was trying to do something in Halifax. I wasn't from there. I was coming there from a different place and with my own ideas and things. So sometimes I wish there was more of a scene that I could be part of. I always wanted to be cooler. You know, I always wanted to be really cool, but, you know, in the end I did my own thing, and got to know people that way, and then got to, at some point you step back and you go, well, I guess that was a scene, you know, those even though it just felt really honest and those were my buddies, and, you know, you can look back on it and go, well, there's something that was happening. But I don't think I ever really felt like there was something already happening that I became part of. So in the beginning maybe there was a bit of tension, or it was a bit of a tough upward kind of battle, but once things started going, I've always found there to be a lot of support and enthusiasm. And I think Holy Fuck was the easiest, just because it was something that came about after I'd been living here for a while, and everybody involved in the band was part of other bands, and so there was almost kind of like an immediate family just through those other bands. But as I travel more, that community is no longer one that is where necessarily I'm living, and then therefore it's not necessarily Canadian anymore. You know, that community for me is sometimes the bands that I'm traveling with, and they might come from anywhere in the world, and I think that's as equally exciting. It's never been for me about being Canadian as so much as it's been about just kind of like really exploring the musicians and the people and the art that your friends are making, the people close to you are making, and hopefully when you look back 40 years it'll be all that much more special. So I think that's sort of been the reward.
Back home, you notice there's little microcosmos going on in Toronto of people helping each other out, and there's
different little scenes there, whether it's based on genre,
or just on Friends, or yeah, and like you said, we're away so long. We come back and we kind of come back into it and see it happening. But I think it definitely happens. Lots of musicians that I guess I would know. Who wouldn't necessarily be into what we're doing. Still support it.
As far as like there being a sort of a connection, I see we sort of have this brotherhood, and maybe more so they do with other groups, but with guys like Megazoid, which is Haji from World Parade. Those guys, we've done some work with Megazoid, and Chad Van Galen seems to be like a super homie of the bands as well as Winter Sleep, who shared Mike and Lowell both played in Holy Fuck, and I played with Mike for a while in Holy Fuck before Matt joined. So there is this definitely not being a Canadian, but I could kind of see some things a little more from the outside, and I definitely see a real community there, which is cool in Toronto, but even outside of that, because like Chad lives in Alberta, and those Winter Sleep guys, they were in Halifax, and now they live in Montreal. So there's like lots of I don't know. There's a lot of, you know, I don't know where Rob from Megazoid's living now. Maybe he lives in Montreal, but there's like a super like connectedness between those groups, and especially in Toronto, the scene there, like all these people. It seems like they're all kind of around, and they played each other's shows, and it's super cool. I like it. It's cool to be sort of peripherally part of that. Yeah, I don't live there, but when I'm there, I feel like, you know, everybody's very welcoming and accepting of it. So, but when I'd be abroad with Enan, people were always talking about this New York scene, and it's just like, there's a million bands here. There's no scene. Maybe certain venues have little like groups of musicians that sort of congregate, but even like being from Ohio, in Dayton, where there was a smaller group of bands and a few venues, it still didn't seem as I don't know. It seems different in Canada, or especially in like just what I've seen in Toronto. Like the vibe's different. Maybe it's a little more specific to up there, but it's cool.
More recently, there's been my friend James Mejia has been working quite steadfast at his hand-drawn Dracula imprint, and I'm doing what I can to help out. I believe in the bands on the label. It is a label, I guess I should explain. And so we've done a couple nights so far already where the bands that are on that label have come together and put on a show, and the response has been really good.
Brian and Graham and Matt and I, the bass player, we all played as Brian's backing band at one of the shows in Europe recently. I know that Matt he plays he's got all kinds of stuff going on. I don't know how busy he is with it, but he's playing in some like sort of country bands and this and that. And Graham does stuff with his girlfriend Julie, the girl I mentioned earlier, Julie Fader.
I play with all sorts of different people, and a lot of people support my music too, as far as lineup changes, and I find that when I'm touring a lot and I come back into town and I have a show playing my own songs, I can pick up the phone or email friends, and they come and support my stuff just at the drop of a hat. It's really nice. And recently I was on tour in Europe, and I was on tour with Great Lake Swimmers, and then at the end of the tour I was on tour with Chad Van Galen, and while I was away my laptop was stolen off of a table right in front of the stage just during a sound check. So while I was away, just to get back to your question, my friend Kate Boothman emailed Sarah Harmer, Greg Keeler, the Sadies, Wayne Petty from Cuff the Duke, Attack in Black, and my friend Pete Hall, who plays in my band, and asked them all secretly if they would like to play a show to get me a new laptop. And I'm on tour in Europe, and I had no idea. I was in Switzerland with Chad Van Galen, and we played with women that night, and it was like a love fest show where we were all just full of appreciation for each other and each other's music, and just seeing our friends for that one show. And that night in Toronto at the Dakota, all of those people performed. There was a lineup up the street, and there was a $15 cover charge, and like Greg Keeler and the Sadies played, and Sarah Harmer, Attack in Black, all these people, and all my friends went, and a lot of them being musicians and artists and stuff, so that's a pretty current story as far as me recognizing the support I have as a player and as a friend and as an artist in Toronto. Like, that's a really cool, special Toronto story for me. I didn't expect it, or really, like who would expect that to happen, really, so that's definitely came home from tour and felt pretty loved. Look at these guys. They're so adorable. Didn't wanna be demanding. Doesn't matter if you call me again. Every town in Canada, you see people coming out to the shows that you've gone to see play before, and yeah, it's really special. It's a supportive country. I think that there's some pissy people that aren't really too involved with each other's lives and music and support and stuff, but I've pretty much had a overly positive experience across the country, like from the Maritimes to British Columbia. It's really great. It's just like I never knew you at all. When I tour, I want it to be with people that I care about tremendously and that I get along with well, because it's got so many challenges as far as distances you have to go, and you don't sleep in your own bed, you don't you don't eat the food that you prepare at home, and the hours are ridiculous. It's a 24-hour day when you're on tour. There's the drive, there's the loading in, there's the sound check, there's the waiting around, there's the everything, and so it's really become valuable to me to be around like-minded, laid-back, kind people, and it can be the most amazing experience in the world if you're in the company of your friends or new friends that you've just made, but it's the most important thing to me.
The start of my involvement with Broken Social Scene would probably be that I met Kevin and we fell in love and we went to Vegas and got married. He was at the Harris Institute studying music management, etc. And then we kind of fell in love and he dropped out. Although he had started managing bands and getting his like little fingers in the pot. And then he started making music with Charlie, and we were living in a little house on Markham Street, and that's when they did the first album at his parents' house. Slowly, we started creating a community, kind of like out of our friends, and we started meeting people through friends, and Kevin started playing all the time, and we were going out to see bands all the time, and, you know, listening to music all the time. He met Brendan, well, when Kevin and I lived here. and they kind of fell in love, and Brendan became like the third in our relationship, which I loved because Brendan can cook and Kevin can't, and I worked so much that it was nice to have home cooked meals by Brendan. And they started making music in the basement, and then people just kept growing and growing, and the community kept growing and growing, and before you know it, it's just kind of came out of like a huge community and group of friends. And it was really fun, and we used to throw parties here all the time, and the band used to just play here like every day, and I'd just come home from work and there'd be people here. For Christmas, Kevin bought me a trumpet because things started getting really big, and I'd always wanted to learn how to play the trumpet, and I play another instrument, but I'd always wanted to learn how to play the trumpet. So it was like the best Christmas present I ever had, because I opened it, I had no idea what it was, and it was a trumpet, and he's like, things are getting pretty big and we don't want to leave you behind, so like get on it. And yeah, and then I kind of played a little bit here and there, and yeah, things got crazy, and it was pretty nuts. There were always 5 core members, but it really was, like, it really is a collective, and it still is a collective, although a lot of people don't think it is. But I mean, I can't even count on my hands how many trumpet players have played with the band, or how many, you know, guitar players have switched back and forth, and then Johnny Crossingham's gone, and then he's back, and then Jason's here, and then Jason's gone, and then Sam comes in, and then, you know, a guy calls in and says, hey, I hear you're going to be in Michigan. I love your band. Can I play trumpet with you? And they say yes. And the strange guy is on the bus, and he's totally awesome and happy to be there, and it's amazing. Or like, you know, between Emily and between Lisa Lopsinger and Julie Penner coming in and out, and Leslie, and like, you know, everybody's constantly shifting. So it still is very much a collective. You know, really, it's friends, family, and respected people in the music community who, you know, artists and people who, you know, kind of, it's like you're communicating with people that you play music with. It's, you know, everybody knows each other. A lot of people have played with each other, knows people that each other has played with. So, you know, everybody kind of hangs here, and that's where you find out about things and kind of get on guest lists if you're sitting and you run into someone and they're like, hey, you should come to my show tonight, or, you know, find out about parties, or say, hey, we're looking for an extra so-and-so, do you want to come join in? So it's not like Facebook. You can actually go out and meet people and talk to them and, you know, show your face and get involved and be a part of it. So it's a vibrant community. And, you know, and there are people whose music I really don't even like that much, but I'm happy to see them succeed because they're good people, and, you know, it's good art. Not everybody likes everything, but good art and good people, it's a good combination for success, hopefully.
What was funny is that rather than like start a record label, which is the kind of like thing that a lot of people had been doing, what me and my friends did instead was we created a music night and a zine, and that's called Wavelength. So, and that's probably the thing that I'm best known for in Toronto was co-founding Wavelength. So that started in '99. So Wavelength was this way of kind of like sort of generating excitement, like a sense of collective excitement. But it sort of crossed that boundary of going from self-promotion towards kind of trying to promote the whole music scene. And that was kind of like really what made Wavelength successful. And some of the bands that were small and starting out, when we were starting out, have gone and become really popular, like the Constantines and Feist and VSS and Holy Fuck, Final Fantasy. And, you know, there's quite a big list of people that played Wavelength in their early days who've gone on to become successful. A lot of people have a lot of like really positive memories about going to Wavelength and hanging out at Wavelength over the years. Like Justin and Kat from Lullaby, I don't know if they mentioned this, but they met at a Wavelength night at our first anniversary.
So for them, for a long time, they celebrated their anniversary at our anniversary. So Lullaby basically became the unofficial Wavelength anniversary house band.
We started dating as a couple, both coming from other bands that we were playing in at the time, and figured, okay, well, we're getting together romantically, let's get together musically as well. Basically.
She plays bass. I liked the idea of playing drums.
It was his novice band as a drummer.
Yeah.
So everything has kind of gone from the ground up with that, and then it's what now, 8 years later.
Yeah.
So we figure we know our instruments enough now with that behind us.
Let's put out another record.
Oh, I don't know.
Musically? No, we didn't have goals.
We didn't have any.
We
were just goofing around even. I don't know. Like, I mean, it was rock and roll because we were in love, and love because we love rock and roll.
And Amgrave has got like pretty much, I mean, without the drummers, because I was the drummer on the drummer orchestra, but every other person who's in DMX pretty much on that record. Plus pretty much everybody who works at this store.
Yeah.
And
a
John
handful
from
of all our friends
Constellation. So the support's been really good.
In Europe, it's like, you travel 2 hours and you're in a different country with a different language and a different scene, and it seems almost
even in America too.
In America, yeah, it's a lot more segregated that way. So maybe there is something about having a country that's so vast that actually makes the united, like the little, the larger cities in each of the provinces so much more united, because there's not much else for so far around.
Well,
I mean, that's like talking that end of town. I mean, our end of town, you got like Ottawa and Montreal, and everything's kind of a bit closer. But once you get into like
look at it
areas,
this way. If it's a landmass the size of whatever, what is it? The second largest landmass on the planet is Canada. There's only really 5 places you can play. Like there's 5 cities you can play in the largest landmass.
So I guess those places get pretty condensed with a good crew of people.
Yeah.
I mean, we ask people to be on our records. We've been on numerous other people's records as well. And yeah, it's never work. It's only fun.
It's only fun. Yeah.
It's an honor. I mean, it's like if somebody says, "Hey, Kat, I want you to come and fucking screech at the opening, chord of our record," which ends up, getting put out on Matador. Like, sure, I'll do it. Of course,
Little jazz hands.
And then let alone like DMX. I mean, DMX
we
is
do
always
that. Yeah. Broken Social Scene.
Social Scene has always got a ton of people.
Although they're kind of like the Borg. Once you sing on their record, you kind of end up in their band.
I didn't know. I've never sang on their record.
But it seems like the Canadian way, and then Montreal's just the same with the whole like Godspeed, Constellation, Arcade Fire, Unicorns, like everybody's in everybody else's band scenes. Our winters are really cold.
Yeah, I think people kind of
people like to hang out in each other's apartment and they end up writing songs together. And it's like, all right, cool.
I'll go for beer and it's like, you know what, dude, you should really fucking sing on my record.
You play trombone.
I'd love to. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Let's do it.
I guess I just feel like community. You're gonna find community anywhere you go, right? I mean, there's community in every city, every town. I think what's kind of happened that's sort of special in the last, I don't know, what would you say, maybe 6 or 7 years or something in Canada, is that finally bands became commercially viable, so people would hear about them. But what I do think is interesting and different about the music community in Toronto, at least, is the willingness for people to play in so many incarnations of bands. Where we come from Winnipeg, I think it feels a little bit more rigid, like you get your band and those are your 4 people, your 5 people.
Yeah, I mean, the pool of musicians to choose from in a small town like Winnipeg are very few. And you get dropped to Toronto and there's a huge list of musicians I'd love to play with.
And so it's just not as rigid, so I do like the fact that you can do shows like we did with Social Scene, this summer at Harbourfront, where there can be 8 or 9 different songwriters who all get to do their own songs. Everyone plays them, and that I feel like is a little bit special. It's a little bit like I don't know, like a review of the old sort of sense, where everyone's each other's backing band. So I like that. I mean, I played mostly with Do Makes They Think now, not so much Broken Social Scene. But those guys, of course, are also playing in different groups, and there's Justin's in the Lullaby Orchestra with his wife, Kat, and Charlie's in Social Scene, and I play with Charlie in the Happiness Project. Ohad, our guitarist, has his own solo project called Years that I play with, and so does Charlie, so it's kind of like, it's the same sort of thing, you know, a different group.
I tried to find melodies in ordinary speech that were particularly musical. So what I did is I invited my neighbors over to my house and asked them about life or happiness or basically it was just conversations that tried to come towards something that was a little bit meaningful. And then I listened back to try and find moments that had particular musical quality. So first I'm going to play a recording of my neighbor Mrs. Morris and what she has to say about happiness. And then my friend Karen here is going to play Mrs. Morris on saxophone. So here's Mrs. Morris.
Happiness is love. Love makes you keep happy. You can't just love yourself and you don't love other people. You got to love people. And love is right there. And if you feel happy to know that you're my neighbor and I love you. And you're able to come away today from invite when you feel nice. I'm feeling happy.
Having a community that supports experimental thought, that sort of supports that kind of creativity, gives you license to try all kinds of avenues that you might not normally try. I mean, just knowing in the back of my mind that my friends are going to like what I'm doing, they're going to get a kick out of me making sounds out of the melody out of people's voices, and I know that some of my other friends are working on some really interesting projects. It's kind of like you feel a certain momentum going with the group where you can allow yourself to explore different avenues that you might not otherwise be able to do.
It's always better. I want some butter.
Let's get butter.
I mean, I do think that it's sort of time for the next group of bands to kind of come to the forefront. That's what I think. I mean, we're all in our 30s and like even 40s now, you know, so, and it's not to say that the music isn't still good and that people shouldn't still come out and support, shows, but I do think it's time in all of these cities for the next group to come up, and I'm kind of just wondering what it's going to be.
And Sum 41s and Billy Talents and everything else, right? So
for sure. I don't know if your guess is as good as any. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, my reflex.
And you're also comparing a country of like 30 million people to a country of 350 million or whatever. So I mean, I'm sure there's lots of bands in the U.S. that are doing what bands in Canada are doing. They're just not getting the recognition because the market is bigger and the market is saturated with, whatever, people trying to make it or top 40 bands or whatever. There's a better system in place in Canada for independent artists. Like there's a grant system and stuff like that. There's a lot of independent record labels doing their thing.
A lot of people, everybody's played with everybody, and yeah, it's good, it's supportive. I think collectively when, it sort of became a thing, I guess, the Toronto music scene or whatever, that was good. It sort of helped everybody out, and I think it's, I don't know, it sort of had its moment, like, I don't know, maybe a Seattle or, I don't know, a New York or whatever. I think it sort of had its moment.
The more I travel, the more I find good bands and good musicians and good people. For example, Seattle in the 90s, like there was a grunge explosion, where everybody who was on any kind of, grunge tip coming from Seattle got signed to a different band. I mean, it's a different outcome, but I think everybody was kind of on the same page in that city at one point in time, But
But Chicago is a great city for music. I think in the 90s, I mean, we listened to everything that was coming out of Chicago. We listened to, you know, anything that was on Thrill Jockey Records. We would buy up. Like, it was, you know, there's a great music community in Chicago too, and I think it's probably, you know, equal, if not more vibrant than the Toronto music community. You know, it's different, you know, but I think, you know, we took inspiration from it still. Like Bundy K. Brown's record, Directions in Music. You know, it was so egoless. You know, the songs didn't have titles. It was just called Directions in Music, and it had their names on it. It was just music. There was no singing, there was no solos, there was no ego attached to it, and it really appealed to us in terms of just making music because you love music. And so that, in a sense, gave us a little bit of wind in our sails to sort of keep going with the same idea, and we had plenty of people to support us.
Of course, media catches on, you know, a year or 2 years later sort of thing, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's good. You know, everybody helps each other out, and everybody's on everybody else's label, and
totally, and everybody knows everybody.
There's a lot of lazy writers out there, though. Like, and it's just like, you know, this band, side project of, friends of friends. I can't believe how many times I've read the exact same interview, such and such from such a band, or friends of this band, or side project of, and half the time it's inaccurate. I mean, if I were ever to gripe or, you know, not like the community, you know, just so many other things get mentioned, or, you know, other bands or friends of, like, you know, there's a running joke when we started playing, Friends of Godspeed was what we called our first couple tours. You know, the Godspeed Black Emperor were huge, and we always, you know, either opened for them or toured for them, and, you know, it was all like members of Godspeed and Do Make Say Thing, which none of us are, none of us were.
Yeah.
You know, totally inaccurate. And then, you know, it got bigger, and then it was sort of side project of
Godspeed,
you know, or you know, friends of this and that sort of thing, or what have you. You know, like sometimes you just want to hear.
Well, a lot of that came from the Constellation stigma too, because so many of those other bands on Constellation were members of Godspeed. I guess we were the exception to the rule for so long, so everybody just sort of clumped us in as being having members of Godspeed, which we don't, for the record.
So sometimes, I guess in a nutshell, sometimes you want to be just judged on your own merits, I guess, or, you know, just look at us and just critique the album, or look at our show, or what have you, sort of thing. You don't have to state the obvious, blah, 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 this and that, or whatever. So, I don't know, not like there's a reason to gripe or anything, but sometimes you get tired of those interviews.
The air is officially clear on that one.
At the same time, you know, like I was saying earlier, Do Makes are built on a solid foundation of friendship long before the band even formed. You know, on my side of things, it's with Charlie and Dave. Jimmy and Justin, who have been friends even longer. I think they've got, like, I don't know, since they were 6 years old, they've got like almost 30 years together. And, you know, so these are people that you're going to want to know, and will more than likely know, should we survive to the age of 60. And should they survive to the age of 60, we'll be calling them up and still asking them about their grandkids. Well, for me, it's almost always stemmed from friends. I haven't really had to go too often beyond close personal friends that I've been friends with before, you know, any project involvement stemming back like 15 years. So, like Charlie's record, you know, me and Charlie have been best friends for 20 years, and I would have helped him on his record irregardless and get him to help me on mine. And it's like I don't have to look for it because somebody always wants to do something. And so I've never kind of gone too far outside of my immediate, you know, social circle of friends, not just musicians, but friends first, musicians second. The truth is, I never really think about it in that way. It's just about making music, and sometimes your roads cross and the opportunity to get together and do something is there. Sometimes they diverge. You know, the other project, the other bands are taking you on the road, or they're taking them on the road. You just simply don't have the opportunity. But it comes down to one simple philosophy, and that's that everybody wants to make music. And when the opportunity to do it together, whoever that happens to be, because you've made all these friends, all these connections via the projects, and as you're calling it, you know, a collective situation. But it's not about trying to be in a collective or trying to work with as many people as you can. It's just simply about trying to work. And then at certain points, those people that you can work with are the ones you are working with. It's a hard question because I've never really grown up anywhere else, so I'm not exactly sure of the mentality, but I can't imagine that it's a geography-specific concept. You know, I can't imagine that there's something in our water.
So you see an audience, though. I do make show at an audience, man. You know, whether it's Canadian or a U.S. audience, I've seen people in tears. Including myself. It's intense. It's intense stuff.
Hey, the show's over. All the interviews went really, really well. Yeah, if you could just call me when you get this. My mom told me that she has breast cancer, but it's not as serious as I guess it could be. But yeah. So anyway, I'm glad you're back and getting settled into school and everything, so just give me a call and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.
I started doing it for gear purposes when I was first putting studios together. And it's like, well, I'm not using my 2 or 3 great mics today, and I got a buddy that's got a home studio that's doing something. He could use these, and so we just end up sharing gear and lending gear, and certainly part of that collective attitude, I think, stems from that. Sharing musicians, sharing gear, sharing space.
Good. Someday when my last line is written, someday when I'll draw my last breath, when my last words on earth have been spoken, and my lips are sealed in death, don't look on my cold form in pity, and don't think of me as one dead. It'll just be the house I once lived in.
It's a big family, and we just help people like we would help the family. But we're not consciously trying to help. We end up helping a lot. But the bigger thing is we're not deliberately trying to sabotage the other bands, which is a lot more common than people might think.
The summer's to come on home.
It just doesn't seem like work. I've been involved with bands that's had a lot of great friends that were also great musicians. So this isn't new to me, where it's like, oh, this 4-piece band is making a record, but there's 20 musicians on it. What the hell's going on there? But And we're so blessed to have so many talented friends who are awesome players and diverse players. Because anybody can play a stinking guitar, you know, even Liam, the sax player, plays, you know, can play guitar. So it's great to have, it's like, oh, I don't play trombone. I can go, wah, wah, but, you know, Evan Cranley, stellar trombonist. Or, and then, like, in Milan's band, we got Dan, mandol player. Most people that play guitar can play a little mandol, but he's just a superstar, like, just next level, phenomenal dude. And it's just great to have all these people we can just pull in, and they don't even feel like they're working, because they just come, especially to a spot like mine that is, like I say, so it's just like being at home. And you just jam and have a couple drinks, lay some tracks down, and no, zero pressure. It seems funny when I said it, we're not trying to help each other, because we are, but we're not consciously trying. We're in it. We're trying to help ourselves. When Amy asked me to do a record, or if somebody asked me to come play piano on an album, I don't think, oh, I'm helping them. I think, yeah, I get to do something fun. You know, obviously it is helping, but it is amazing to have so many talented people to get to hang out with. I couldn't imagine playing in a band where you just had the same 3 or 4 people every day, and as great as they could be, that seems weird and almost impossible to me. It's because I work with those guys so much, and I don't record people who are my very close friends. I've never done that in my life, and we just end up hanging out together all the time. And somebody likes the Apostle record, so they get me to do it, and then somebody likes their record, and they get me to do it, and it's amazing. So the whole business, from the ground floor, the office staff, and the owners of the label, and it's all amazing. They're all my super close buds, and just so smooth.
A couple of the songs, like Devastation, for instance, like Augie had this great idea to actually get a whole bunch of people together in the room just to record a big, massive jam, kind of like they did in the old days. And we just got people who were friends of ours to just come in, and I don't know, it's kind of weird in Montreal. Like, if you're Anglo, you're kind of, it's a really small community, and there was a lot of people who just at one point decided to move to Montreal, and I think maybe a lot of it had to do with the Constellation thing that was happening in the late 90s, and so it's a small community, so you all just sort of see each other on the street and become friends. And probably like 80 or 90% of my friends are musicians. Like
some of whom I've never played with.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But it's like, if you want something, or you're interested in something on the record, chances are you're either friends with someone who plays that instrument, or you know someone who knows someone who plays that instrument, and they're more than willing and happy to do it, because I think it's like Montreal's sort of come from that. Everybody's always collaborated there. I don't know why it seems a little bit. People do it more there than anywhere else. I could be totally wrong, because I've never really lived anywhere else and made music in any other city for extended periods of time.
Other cities you have to work.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Yeah, there's no working.
You can have a part-time job and survive in Montreal. So you get people like who are in many bands and can actually set aside time to be in a lot of bands quite easily, seemingly more easily than in other places.
we wanted to have a label for the first record, but it just never happened. So we were sort of forced into the position where we had to put our own record out. And when you do that, you just start meeting people, and you start playing shows. And plus, I owned a studio at the time, so that's how I met everybody here, basically, except for my wife. It's why we called the record Dark Horse, because we were actually called the Dark Horse of Montreal, because we didn't sound like anything, well, mostly like what was happening, and we were one of the only bands in the city that had absolutely no recognition at all. So we were just going around, like, all these people in Montreal were like, they liked us, and they were fans, but outside of the city, and even within the city, that was a pretty small, base of people. When Jaguar was interested, we were like, oh great, now somebody can actually put the record out, so we don't have to pedal it ourselves this time. And then we were like, oh well, like if it sells a couple thousand copies, then that's going to be amazing, because then we can like make another record. So, and then we just kind of got lucky, I guess.
There's this kind of crazy statistic about Canada having like 90% of its population is within
100 kilometers of the border?
Yeah, something like that. The 6 degrees of separation thing is really more like 2 degrees of separation.
Hey Rachel, it's your roommate. I just wanted to say thanks again for finding me the room, and I'm super grateful for that. I was mostly calling just to talk because a lot has happened. I got broken up with, and I hate all my classes. And my mom is going to start her first rounds of treatment soon. I'm just really nervous. And I think I'm in love with my best friend. Yeah. I don't really know what I'm doing anymore. I'm kind of lost. I gotta put the film on hold for a while and just sort of figure all this out. Anyway, I was just wondering when next I was going to see you, and if you weren't going to be home anytime soon, then maybe we could talk. I don't know. Yeah, alright. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
I got in my head, I wanted to do for my 30th birthday, I wanted to have a party with 30 bands playing, and that we'd have 2 separate stages, so while one band played their 20-minute set, we'd be setting up the next band on the other stage, and they would just go like that. for 10 hours. And it worked. I mean, one of the bands was Glissandro 70, who decided to DJ instead of actually play, which was a pity because they never play. But yeah, it was good. It was amazing. Lots of good bands. They were all Toronto bands. I didn't have any bands from Montreal because I don't actually live in Toronto all that much anymore. I live there. I have a house there or an apartment there, but I'm just touring all the time and working in other places, so I'm like very rarely home. And so it was kind of like a great opportunity for me to like see my friends and hang out with them. So yeah, we just ended up being all the Toronto bands that I know and love. Well, I'm not so much like that, but that is a very kind of typical decision of a lot of people. My friend Steve Cato, in fact, formed the band Barcelona Pavilion with a complete disregard for the people's musical ability. He simply had these friends who he wanted to make music with, and so Kat learned to play the bass, like Steve taught her to play the bass. Ben didn't actually do anything but sit around and talk with them about good ideas for songs, and then press play on the iPod and stand there, and they kind of played it up a little bit, like that he would just stand there and completely do nothing and try not even to blink while the show was going on. The thing is that the scene in Canada is just, it's very multitudinous. Like a lot of people end up working with the same, that is, what am I trying to say? It's not only is it kind of divergent and spread out, but there's also like long, it's like more like hallways, you know, it all kind of goes in all these different directions. And I mean, you could be a big fan of all the bands on, say, Arts and Crafts and completely know nothing about any of the bands on Constellation, you know what I mean? And similarly, there's scenes in Montreal, scenes in Toronto, multiple scenes in Toronto that are just kind of completely dissociated and disconnected from, you know, the bands, the Toronto bands that are kind of more famous. It started that I was just mostly playing violin in bands like Jim Guthrie Band and the Hidden Cameras, and through the stuff I'd been doing in those two bands, I fell in with the guys in Arcade Fire because Jim was good friends with Tim Kingsbury, and Arcade Fire played as support for a series of shows. So they had asked me to kind of like start doing arrangements for them, and I did arrangements for Dan Goldman, who's playing tonight here, and it just kind of turned into this actual thing, you know, where I'm like doing arrangements for bands. Originally I kind of wanted to try and keep it localized to working for friends and working for next to nothing. In fact, I still kind of try to maintain a pay-what-you-can policy. I do. Maintain pay-what-you-can policy unless I'm working with, like, you know, a band like Pet Shop Boys or something, where their management doesn't understand the concept. So, yeah, there is that draw, and certainly on my 30th birthday, you know, it was a really great feeling to feel like I was kind of, like, catching up with, you know, with the music that my friends were up to. There were some people, like Laura Barrett, I hadn't seen perform in a long time, and she has this 4-piece band, and it was the hottest thing I'd ever seen. It was so good. I think what makes a band more than a person being specifically talented, like being this kind of like, you know, lyrical genius or brilliant singer, what's going to make a band more is the scene in which that band is born. And you can just see it. Hear it in the way that like Brooklyn bands and New York bands are produced, that this is music coming from a very competitive environment, you know. There's just different cultural factors at play, you know, that kind of that influence the scene that will then influence the band. So it's easy to, you know, sit down and say, oh, you know, Julian Casablancas is this, or Karen O is that, or, you know, Dave Sitek is this. But I feel like these people that it's more a product of the scene that they're in rather than their individual sort of like nascent abilities as, you know, musicians or producers. In Canada, it's a very uncompetitive scene. It's just, it's really, really rare, actually, that for people to, you know, walk around talking trash about other bands. And, in fact, when people do so, then people are like, what? What are you doing? You know, how can you say that? Like, I think people in Canada just recognize that everyone's working. We're all just working and trying to make records, and sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not, you know.
family. I mean, we're kind of a big, crazy, functional, dysfunctional family in the social scene. Some knowing others and having closer relations than other people, but we're all still here, which is pretty key. We all still love each other. I love people. I've been addicted to people since I was a kid, and if my personality, if people are into me, and we're in, then I just kind of soak them in, and I love making music with people. Spirit If was a chance for me just to do whatever I wanted and work with whoever I wanted. I love making music with people from social scene, so thus they're all over the album. And I also find a lot of comfort in strangers, and I find changing things up and working with different people's personalities and what they bring to the table creatively. I find that so healthy, and I always have. And that was kind of the nature of how social scene all started. It was just by sort of Brendan bringing his crew of friends, and I brought my crew of friends, and we were just getting together in the basement, thus me being in the basement. And we were just playing for playing. That's where it all happened, downstairs, just so you know. And I had a lovely, lovely marriage there. It was amazing. I mean, you were at my ex-wife's house. He went and stayed at my ex-wife's place. I thought that was a little weird, I'm not gonna lie to you. And obviously everybody wants to be in a band where you can go and tour the world and you can do well when you're trying to make music. So having that happen while we were doing this thing was synergetic. It all kind of came together and it worked. And I think it was a lot of the age differences and the experience that people had musically and the attitudes and the confidence levels. They all just melded into one. And within that, I find it's really healthy for the music because it just, that comes out in the music. You just have all these different personalities and all these ways that people approach sound and melodies. And for me, I'm really addicted to that. That's an addictive thing for me. You know, saying for the sake of doing it, there's a lot of things about playing with people where you're like, well, why don't you just come in and sing some backups or play a tambourine and we'll just say you're there. It would mean so much to me. So there's a lot of people that have come on and played with us that way. But definitely the sound I like has always been big, so I always knew we were going to need the numbers. We were really repressed there for a while. It was very difficult to get out of our country. And there wasn't really much of a great system to do that as well. And I think a lot of these bands, we all just sort of came around swinging at the same time. And I mean, the New Pornographers were the first band that I saw where I saw a group of people that had all different kinds of bands coming and playing together. And we were very much doing that in our basement, but it was just around the Feel Get Lost time that we were doing that. And I did say, like, hey, these guys are rocking out, they're doing well, they're putting each other on a platform. And I know that we really became a home for a lot of bands where we knew that we were going to do it together.
Hey, Sarah. It's me. I got one last interview planned, and I just wanted to know if you wanted to come with me, because it's in Philadelphia, and so was my first interview, and you were there for that too, so I just thought that would be cool. So, give me a call back, and I hope you're around.
I have funny conversations with Carl Newman about that stuff, you know, and it's, you know, it's a joke. It's funny. Well, I think one time Carl and someone else were playing up a feud thing, but it was, you know, it's a joke, you know.
And that was, I think it was me and Brendan Canning, yeah. What did I call him? I called Brendan Canning and Uncle Tom Redhead. I thought he was setting the cause of redheads back for 30 years. I think it's just like a running gag that, you know, nobody laughs at, but it still continues. That, you know, new pornographers and broken social scene are enemies. And made even worse by the fact that our albums came out the same day. So the rivalry all of a sudden became something that was measurable. Yeah, I mean, we're friendly, you know. Like, I don't know those guys. I don't know those guys very well, but I guess we know each other enough that we can joke about things like this, and no one gets offended. Because, I mean, maybe that's an example of, like, being Canadian. Like, both bands know that feuding with another band is so futile and stupid that we could do it jokingly, because obviously we would never do it for real. We weren't looking at it from any career perspective. It was sort of a project. I just thought my band was disintegrating and I wanted to do something else, and I thought, hey, my friend Dan's a pretty good songwriter, I should get him to be the other guy in the band. And I thought, my friend Nico is a really killer singer, I should get her to be in the band. But they were, at that point, they were both completely unknown. And yeah, and everybody else, Blaine was in the band because he was my friend, and we just assembled people. We just thought, who would be good for this? You know, we thought we need a drummer. Who's going to be the drummer? It's got to be an awesome drummer. It's got to be the right person. And, you know, when we went and scouting, kind of cherry-picked who we wanted in the band. But we never thought we were going to do anything that had any sort of impact. But inadvertently, I guess it did. That makes me feel good to know. I mean, if we've had that kind of influence on Canadian music, that makes me feel good. You know, I don't care if we have a musical influence, but you know, if we had some sort of, you know, if there was something in the way that we interacted with each other, or you know, the communality, whatever you call it, of it, that inspired people, you know, that I think that's cool. But I would never claim. I mean, it's nice of Kevin to say something like that, but you know, I would never claim that we, you know, have any responsibility for spawning bands of that nature. I think they did more than us. A lot of parallels. You know, the fact that we're Canadian, but we, you know, from opposite sides of the country. He told me that once. I remember a few years ago, he said when they were trying to get a Factor grant, they said, you know, we're like the East Coast new pornographers. Like, that's what he was using as their selling point. Maybe he made that up. I don't know. He's cool. I really like Kevin. A friendship mentality definitely drives me when I'm trying to put together a band. Like, I would never want to be in a band where I brought somebody in just because I thought they were really good, but I hated them. Like, I could never do that. It was always important for me to like people in bands. I mean, Blaine's in the band just because he's a good friend of mine. I don't think he played keyboards at all when we started. He's just been learning as he goes. So, I guess, yes. Just based on that fact alone, yes, there's definitely a friendship mentality in what we do. I'm not sure that I'd buy that there's some magical thing that Canadian bands have that makes us want to be, you know, in these friendship communes. I mean, I've never been able to figure out what it is. You know, people always want to know, why was it there was a period in time when Canadian bands suddenly got good? You know, like in the 2000s, all of a sudden, there were good Canadian bands. And before that, there weren't really very many decent underground indie bands. I don't know why that is. It's early 2001, talking to a friend of mine, and she said, and we were playing in New York, and she said, yeah, people are buzzing about like the new hot, like Canada's the new hotbed of music, and I think it was based on New Pornographers and Peaches. It seems funny now, because I don't think now nobody thinks of New Pornographers as Peaches as the spearheads of Canadian music. Yeah, but then, you know, Broken Social seemed to show up, and then Arcade Fire, and then it went crazy, and then there was like Left Stars and Metric, and people like Destroyer, who don't get mentioned enough, you know. Frog Eyes, same thing. Maybe I'm just biased towards my cool West Coast friends. I'm glad to see bands, especially in Vancouver, I'm glad to see bands get some attention that have nothing to do with anybody I know, because for years and years it seemed like everybody got some attention out of Vancouver was either like a friend or a friend of a friend. You know, like Black Mountain, or bands like that. or just people I'm in a band with, you know. So when I see, you know, band like Japan Droids getting some attention, I think, go Japan Droids. You know, like I have absolutely no idea who you are, and that's cool. You know, like you're the next generation of cool Vancouver rockers.
I remember watching the Pornographers, and then I guess I don't know. People say, why Canada? Why does it have such a big sound? And I always thought because we needed to be heard. We're tired. I don't know if that was what people were consciously thinking, and people could shoot that down. I can give two fucks. But the point is that I always thought, you know what? If you're gonna give me dumb lines like, "Is it in the healthcare?" then I'll just tell you, no, we were not. It was very difficult to be heard throughout the world, you know. And a lot of bands, I think, went for the big sound because it became an army in a way. We didn't mean to have 5 guitars. God knows we didn't mean to do that, but that's kind of what happened. And even for songs, it's like there's not even any guitars in the song. We have 5 guitars. Here we go. We've always been really good for each other, and I always thought Social Scene was really good for those bands too. I always thought they really stepped it up when we would all play together. I would hear influences when I listen to stuff, and then you hear their influences when you're in your own music, and I think that was what was really good and really refreshing and healthy for everybody, was that influence, that love of each other's music.
When we made Master Romantic, Dan had just put out Thief, Destroyer Thief, and Nico had just done her Furnace Room Lullaby record, and I thought those records were really awesome, and I didn't want to sound like them, but I thought, gotta keep up with these people. I mean, my friends are making these amazing records, and so they set the bar pretty high, and I gotta try and chase that. And, you know, I think that probably helps any group, you know. I'm sure that's what makes all the Arcade Fire, Broken Social Scene people better, or any of those people that play in that scene. There's so many great people around them that inspires you to be better. I mean, I think that always happens in bands. You look at the Beatles, I always think George Harrison must have become an amazing songwriter just because he worked with amazing songwriters, or Kim Deal, you know, working with Frank Black and then going on and be a songwriter herself is just as good. And I think it helps just to be working at a high level. It's like anything you do in life, you know? Like a chess player wanting to play with a chess master, even if they get beaten, just so they can get better.
I think the great thing is that I am just part of a team, though. You know, and I know people need captains because they can understand it better, but I really am part of this team. And that was what was great about Forgiveness Rocker, because the other guys, they weren't around, and our history is currently the topic, and people still think this is the way it is, and like, how do you guys write? Do you get together and you go away on weekends? It's like, no. There's a good, you know, with this record, the 6 of us wrote it. And then we had all our friends and all our players and everyone come in, but it was really great to be a part of the team, because it really fucking challenges you to really listen to people and really choose what's right for the song and put your ego aside and play off each other. You know, with Spirit, I was not a good human being during that time. I was very sulky and whiny, and was not having a good run at things at all, and it woke me up to the idea that this is probably one of the most enjoyable things ever. You need to get your shit together right now. I miss Colette. He's a dad, you know, the guy, Jason Collette, you know, when he put out Here's to Being Here, he was building a home, having a kid, another kid, and making a record. And I said to everybody, look at this guy. Like, gutted a house, rebuilt the whole thing himself. His baby, you know, his wife has labor, finishes his record all in 1 year. Johnny Crossingham back in the days, like he just had so much enthusiasm. He was great. Leslie Weiss used to get angry with us when we wouldn't tell her what we were doing. But there was a time there where we were just kind of like, I don't think we can tour anymore. She's so insane. She kicks over the pedals. She knocks out the guitars. She wants her slap back in her monitor for 25 minutes. What are we doing? And then I miss those old days. Little punk rock Feist. It's the hottest thing I ever saw. Cranley and Millie, but Cranley and Millie have always been there for us from the beginning. And so have James and Emily, and so has Les. And I've always thanked them for that, because we were at a lot of jams a lot of times, and people came through. You know, it's funny, getting Emily to come sing in these New York shows, we were sitting in our apartment, and I was just kind of like, well, you don't have to do the show. And she's like, I know. I said, but we are in town. She's like, and I know, so why wouldn't I do the show? I'm like, well, I'm just saying, I think you should do the show. She's like, I think I should too. But why do we talk like this? I'm like, because it's different now. You know? And because there's so many other people involved, and because you have your own way of doing things, and we have our own way of doing things. And you know, these are your friends, and you don't want to fucking piss them off, but it's funny, we still tiptoe around each other. Those were good. I guess the youth is what I'm saying. I owe a lot to those people. You know, I owe a lot to them. I wasn't the greatest person I tried to be at times. I'm very infuriated. But we stuck through it, and we still did, and we see each other, and when we see each other, we're happy. And last night when we played with Emmy and we did anthems, I still felt it. I felt it. It's like, this is what it was about. And I like that we don't do it all the time, because it makes it really special, and you need those moments as you get older and older. You don't need everything to be the same. And that's the greatest thing about this band, and it's been our winning streak ever since, because you can always change it up and find new people and get new people to play on it, and old people to play on it. It's amazing. Selling the world to fucking toilets, and people were turning to Canada's music to help them get through it. That makes sense to me. You know, I'm not American, so. Until we die. This thing's going strong. And when we reunite, sometimes it's the only way you see your friends. So I don't see this thing ever going away. It can't end. Though there were a lot of times we thought it was going to. But now, we beat it, you know? It makes complete sense to me, you know? I have to tell you that this whole thing makes complete sense to me. All we want is for people to feel it all when they hear it. You know, just feel every fucking emotion you have. Let's try to do this.
This film took more than a year to complete, and maybe I don't have everything figured out, but I found out some pretty important stuff about myself. And I found out that even though everyone has their own explanation about why this music gets made the way it does, the one thing that matters is that it gets made. Because for everything that happened in the last year, for all the problems and the doubt, with this music in my head, none of it seemed all that big. And it just made me feel like an answer was on the way. And in a lot of cases, there was. And even if it's not, well, then there's definitely another album coming out soon.
I hope to steer people to your music.
Well, thank you.
That is my hope. That you know, at the end of the day, that is what I want to do. Is I want to make a big collage of Canadian music.
I think it's like kind of like these things sometimes are weird for us because like when you're faced with someone like who likes and believes in what you do, like it makes me feel very weird because we're not like that. Like we don't all the time believe in what we're doing, like even in our day-to-day lives, I think. Or well, I can't speak for everyone, but you know what I mean? Like it's just like it's kind of like it's like holding us up too high is what it feels like.
Doesn't come in threes. Tripping on the town, tripping like I'm seized. Never the car ride, never the key. I've always been failing, minding my means, and the one unbeliever, and the one who can see. There's a difference in texture. I know about me. And you wanna love this right between the knees, get a little bit bloody. What does that have to do with me? Those things anymore. I really don't think about those things. I really don't think about those things anymore. And I don't think about those things. Was it such a baby? Was it making believe? Get you a creature's cause, get you a creature creed. Typical lazy eye, stare for you and me. about those things anymore. Yeah, I don't wanna think about those things. I really should've thought about those things a little more. I really should've thought about those things. I really should've thought about those things a little more. I didn't think about those things. Superconnected, time to leave. It's a superconnected, time to leave.
And that would be the end of that song, ladies and gentlemen.